Special thanks to our promotional partners at the American Philatelic Society.
The APS is the largest stamp collecting organization in the world, supporting collectors of any level worldwide.
For more information about membership and APS services, visit stamps.org.
I'm Charles Epting from H.R. Harmer in New York City.
And I'm Michael Cortese of Noble Spirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
And this is Conversations with Philatelists. Now, Michael, you've been particularly excited about who we're talking to today. This is one that, in our group chat that we have going, this is one that you've been really jazzed about. And why don't you tell people who we're going to be speaking with today?
Yeah, I find it really interesting. Today we're talking to Daisy Todd of the Stamp Restorer. So she restores philatelic and ephemera.
Conserves.
Yes.
I think she'll go into all, exactly what it is she does, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression that she's turning a cheap cover into $1 million cover.
Right. Well, that's kind of why I was so excited to talk to her, is because it is this gray area in philately where people aren't so sure what to think, because you get a certificate that says it's been repaired, and people think, oh, well, this is awful or something, but it's
I think it's a lack of information. I think people don't know enough to have a fully formed opinion about what restoration versus conservation means. Yeah. And I think we're both going to learn a lot, because this is something that neither of us have a lot of any experience in. So this is a facet of the hobby that really is new for us, and presumably new for a lot of people listening. I know Daisy's father very well. He's an extremely accomplished philatelist, but I've never met her, never spoken to her. This is all new for us.
Yeah. So I'm here to learn too. In addition to the questions I'll be asking, I'll be listening to the answer.
Absolutely. I think this. No, I think we're both gonna get a lot out of this one. Yeah. So let's bring her in. All
right. Well, here we go. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So we've seen a lot about your work online, the kind of stuff you do. How has it been going during the quarantine and everything like that?
Well, it's an incredibly easy job to do from home, because I have a conservation studio at home. So there's been a lot of collectors that have gone through their collections. Since obviously being quarantined. So actually I've been getting a lot of work through the door, which has been quite nice. And it's also been quite nice because I haven't had to juggle it with my work at the British Library. So if anything, it's actually been a good year for me.
I think the first question a lot of people would have is that there's obviously a huge difference between doctoring something and restoring something with the intent to deceive, and restoring something with the intent to preserve. And there's very legitimate, honest reasons to want to have something worked on. Can you talk a little bit about that dichotomy between maybe people doing it for nefarious reasons or doing it for completely legitimate reasons?
Yeah, no, this obviously is one of the biggest hurdles in philatelic conservation, because obviously conservation is still massively frowned upon because it's often incredibly misunderstood. Obviously the profession is a lot of word of mouth, and a lot of, it's obviously very discussion based. And so with art conservation, archive conservation, every other form of conservation, any sort of material, you're allowed to conserve it. And, obviously we work under a lot of guidelines and ethics, and we obviously have to be incredibly highly qualified to do what we do. And so for philatelists to say that it isn't good enough is it was one of the main hurdles when I started in this. But as with any paper items, they get damaged. So there's a lot of maps, that have corners come off, or, a lot of philatelic items are very badly stored. And so to repair them is justifiable. But the main guidelines that I work under, that we all work under, all conservators, and they're in every country. The American Institute of Conservation, ICON, which is the Institute of Conservation in England, it's basically that you don't restore something back to making it look shiny and new and deceptive. So you conserve something back to its stabilized state. So if an envelope has a massive tear through it, you repair it, and you do a nice job of repairing it, obviously, and you make it very subtle. And no repair is invisible. Every repair is visible under magnification because of the way that tears are. You can't fully reverse damage. So all damage is still visible, no matter if it's been repaired. So it's never deceptive. It's always visible. But obviously it improves the aesthetic of the item, and it improves the long-term stability of it. And I get a lot of requests from suspect dealers and things that want me to reperforate and regum and all this, and I don't do that. I mean, I repair perforations. If a perforation is torn, or if a stamp block is has come apart, then I'll repair it. But again, obviously the repairs are visible, but I never regum and I never reperforate, and I just don't take the work up. I just say I can't. I don't do that. So it's it's very clear from the start the limits. Really.
Do you sign your every piece that you repair, or give like a certificate saying this has been repaired?
Yeah, I mean, this is treated with skepticism, and this is very customary in the conservation world, is that we write a treatment report about everything that we do. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's initial analysis, so all the initial documentation of the condition it's in, or the photography, and then so that's all documented, and then all the treatment that you carry out on it and photographs of it after treatment. And these condition reports are sent with the items, and obviously it's recommended that these reports stay with the items once they're sold. Right. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. But I mean, my father is a philatelic expert. He works for Corin Fila, and he was initially, like every other philatelist, and was like, oh, you shouldn't be altering stamps. Oh, that's forgery. And I said, I'm not altering stamps. I'm repairing envelopes, essentially. Most of it is stain reduction and physical repair. And, he's obviously been swayed, having seen all the before and afters, that, I'm not a forger.
They're quite fantastic. The before and afters on your website there, they're incredible.
Well, I mean, it's the befores that are the worrying thing, and that's only collectors that are actually caring for their collections. I mean, I've obviously gone to a lot of stamp shows in my time, working on stands with my dad, and there's covers shoved in cardboard boxes, and inevitably these things are getting damaged, and inevitably they're irreplaceable, so they're going to have to be repaired at some point. Right,
like all great historical pieces.
Yeah.
What are the biggest issues that you come across? What is, is it humidity? Is it the plastic sleeves that a cover is stored in? What would you say the most damaging processes are for a cover, and what can collectors maybe avoid so they don't have to come to you in the future? What are the biggest red flags that you see when you look at the way somebody stores a collection?
Yeah, it's it depends if it's a private collector or a museum, because obviously museums have the humidity and the temperature thing totally under control, and so for them it's really physical storage that's the issue. Whereas for private collectors, a lot of their storage facilities are in attics or damp rooms. So the libraries are always perfect, but some of the collection areas are not so good. And I think the main issue is physical storage methods. Is that it's poor boxing. It's people not putting their items in chemically inert polyester sheets. It's the old PVC albums. They're also an absolute nightmare because the damage that's sustained from them is totally irreversible. But yeah, I mean, it's generally physical storage. It's generally cramming too many items in a box and then it getting torn and ripped. I mean, that's the main issue, which is obviously easily overcome with good storage boxes and plastic sleeves. But then, that's an expense. So some people want to do it. But yeah, I mean, that's the main preach is that when I have to go and consult on storage areas, that's the main lecture. Yeah.
Oh, you do that. You consult with people to tell them how they should store their collections better. Or?
I get asked to go around and look at collections quite a lot. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's an incredibly niche topic. Right. What I do, it's I mean, I trained as obviously a paper and book conservator. But it's my area of interest is obviously incredibly niche. So I get asked to do a number of random things by my philatelic clients. Yeah.
Yeah. That was actually going to be one of my next questions. Was you mentioned your father kind of started you in the hobby, but how did you go down the path of restoring items in comparison to just collecting them or buying or selling them? What made you want to repair things?
I'm not a philatelist at all. I mean, he's the philatelist. I just had to help him.
Yeah.
I was an artist, and then I was also incredibly good at science. So to put the two together, I wanted to do art restoration. And then I studied it for my degree, and then I did it as a master's. And I just ended up enjoying paper and books more than artworks, and I enjoyed the way the materials worked and the repair processes, etc. So I specialised in that, and obviously a very logical jump was to just repair philatelic items, considering there were so many available to me. And when I got the job at the British Library, my interest and knowledge of philatelic material then meant that I could obviously work on their collections with some amount of confidence. And yeah, I mean, a bit like I think also what got me interested in it when I had specialised in paper was my father's obviously his initial absolute naysaying of it. So it really got me frustrated because I was like, well, this is really common in every single museum all over the world. All items, all paper items are conserved. That's how we preserve history. You're a temporary custodian of these items, and it's your job to make sure they're in good condition. And so that initially made me write some articles, for the Fakes and Forgeries Experts magazine and things like that. So, just explaining the difference between restoration, preservation, conservation, and the terminology of it, because obviously, alteration is manipulation, which is forgery, which is it's really ill-conceived. So that was initially how I got interested in it, and then I just started doing all the practical work on it, and I got a lot of opportunities, obviously working at Smithsonian and the British Library, and it just advanced from there. So,
how long have you been working for the Smithsonian and the British Library? When did that start?
Well, I the Smithsonian I worked for after my university degree, so that was only for a couple of months, 6 months or so. Because they only had a short-term contract, because they don't have an in-house restorer conservator all the time. So that was a short-term contract, and then I obviously got my job at the British Library. So, I mean, that's been going on for like six years probably now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, talking about that process a little, you mentioned the Smithsonian doesn't have a full-time conservator on staff. Is that typical for museums to have a full-time person repairing material that either they've come across, or does a lot of material that they already have get damaged in the process of moving it? Or?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, all museums have in-house. Not all large-scale museums have in-house conservation teams. So the Smithsonian have a whole conservation centre, and the National Postal Museum could send stuff to them. But a lot of the museums have in-house conservators too in the Smithsonian, but the National Postal Museum didn't. So, but they did have preservation staff which do the displays and the boxing and a lot of the exhibition work. But most big museums have in-house conservation just because it's so multifaceted. We have to do all of the environmental monitoring, all the pest management, all of the repair, all of the exhibitions, all the loans, all the I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, and and then obviously you have the care of the collection as a massive trade too. So, yeah, all big museums do, but all small museums tend to contract the work out to private conservation studios. So yeah, I mean, that's just because of money and funding, and you're applying for grants and things. Yeah.
Right. You never really think about it like that. Have you ever had to repair the same item twice? For different...
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was working on a big birch bark book. So it was a Kashmiri manuscript and it was made from birch bark, which is very volatile material, as you can imagine. And the bark is grown around a tree in layers, and the layers delaminate over time. And I repaired it all. It took about 250 hours to repair. Now, this is a very, very big project. So, like, a lot of philatelic items take about 3 hours, whereas, this was a huge project. And it got roughly handled after I'd repaired it and opened flat rather than at an angle, with book supports, and that had to be re-repaired, yeah. But, I mean, they're sure they get me employed, so I don't worry.
Yeah. Hopefully it didn't take as long the second time.
No, it didn't, no. So, I mean, but obviously we because we send a lot of items out on loan and exhibition, we're constantly, having to remount and re-put items, say big maps, we have to put them back in their volumes of their books, and then take them out, mount them, and flatten them and repair them, and then send them out for exhibition, and then when they come back in, we obviously have to put them all back into the book. So it's there's a lot of items that we handle a lot. Yeah, I mean, obviously some are in more demand than others.
When somebody sends you a cover or a block of stamps, how much of it is routine? How much of it are the same problems, again, whether it's staining or tears that you see over and over? And how often is it a new problem that maybe you've never come across that forces you to think outside the box? How much, again, in terms of philatelic material, is a lot of it just run of the mill? You're doing the same thing to every cover?
Every item is different. And that's probably the most interesting thing about the job, actually, is that every single item needs a different way of conserving it, because every single item is printed on different types of paper, it's sustained different damage, it has different expansion contraction rates. The way, say if it's got gum on the back, you can only repair it in a certain way because you don't want to disturb the gum. Say it's really stained, then all staining is obviously from different sources, so you have to do solubility testing on all the inks, you have to, and the type of staining and the inks and the fragility of the paper will dictate the way that you clean it or reduce the staining. And there are limitations to every treatment. If you've got a really beautiful robust rag paper, you can almost do anything on it, and you can carry out all the aqueous treatments you like, and the paper will stay strong. But as with philatelic material, often envelopes are made with very bad quality paper. Stamps, normally nice quality paper, but obviously incredibly thin. And inks, obviously handwritten inks, are very soluble. So the methods to use on philatelic covers and items is obviously quite limited, and it's always a puzzle. So I end up using a lot of solvent gels and methods by which you can localize treatment, so that you don't have to immerse a whole item in a bath, say, which obviously wouldn't suit a philatelic cover because the stamp would come off and the ink would run. So you can localize treatment, but you have to get the solvent absolutely right in order for the stain to be lifted out with the gel. So it's a very, very complicated process. And also, a lot of the most common request is to remove foxing spots, again, which is, can be done quite easily, but the process to do it, you have to then wash it with water. So there's a lot of impeding factors, and every treatment process is a total puzzle, and you have to really navigate it carefully, because obviously if you damage the item, you're screwed. So there's a lot of risk mitigation when coming up with a treatment plan. None are the same. But I mean, like repair processes with Japanese tissue and wheat starch paste, I mean, that's the most basic, and that is quite customary and quite easy. So it's a nice one when I get those to the door.
Say hypothetically you receive a stamp that's just missing its corner completely. How would you go about repairing that? Do you have to find, or do you keep specific paper from different issues on hand that you then attach to it, or can you not even repair that corner?
No, I repair the corner, but we repair with archivally safe paper. So Japanese tissue that I then, with different types, there's a million different types of Japanese tissue. There's some really fine grain, some really. So I basically choose the most suitable type of Japanese tissue, then tone it back with a number of paints, and then so I make it look like the stamp, and then I can do the infill. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, you would never attach old paper to old a material that didn't come originally with the object to the object, because that again is a really grey area. So that's kind of misleading. Whereas if you have like a repair paper that obviously looks incredibly similar, that's how we repair stuff. Is we use conservation grade materials to repair items.
Yeah, really following a strict code of ethics there.
Yeah, no, it is. Well, it has to be, because there has to be this. Every object is open to interpretation, so there has to be guidelines, because everyone can interpret it differently.
Sort of a philosophical question, and I guess kind of a depressing question, but I think back to some of the early U.S. postmasters provisionals that you look at an image of them 100 years ago and you look at them today and the ink is faded. These things were not produced to last 100, 200 years. Nobody was thinking about will somebody put this in a stamp album 2 centuries from now when they were produced. Are there things that cannot be preserved? Are there philatelic items that won't exist in 100 years? Are there things that will just disappear no matter what you do or no?
It's the Americans that do it as well. It's irradiated mail that you get in Washington and in certain postcodes along America. Because obviously, I wrote an internal paper for the Smithsonian about this actually, and it's in 2001 you got the anthrax letters, and then everything started getting irradiated with ionizing radiation. It was so the radiation that they use is 2 million times stronger than what we use on X-ray, and that's to denature the bacteria. So the anthrax letters that got obviously blitzed, I were there when I was at the Smithsonian, and I got to see them and I didn't touch them, but they were there on the desk. And they're just the rate that basically they removed 80% of the strength of the paper, and they have very little chance of surviving because they've basically been annihilated. Like all the chemical structure is like the cellulose is all depolymerized. It's a nightmare. But these are all preserved nicely in a very padded box and obviously handled very gently. So they will be preserved. But all irradiated mail in America is, that all goes to the White House, etc. That of documents that could be of, severe importance in the future, that you'd want to look at. They have, if they're not preserved correctly now, they have a limited chance of survival. Yeah. So they're the ones that are most at risk. But there's a lot of items in the British Library, like papyrus, etc. That was all disposable. Like most archival materials were not meant to be preserved for long time. So it's only lovely leather bindings, etc. that people want to look after and keep well. So having disposable materials, and their preservation quandary is quite common in our line of work. But it's whether or not someone can see the importance and then preserve them accurately, preserve them well from now on. That's, yeah.
What would you say the percentages of work you get from the private sector, if you will, and then versus museums?
Oh, I only get work from private clients. For this job, I obviously I'm employed at the British Library as well, but I work only with private clients. Yeah, I don't. I have work in local museums in Hampshire, but that's just paper based. It's not philatelic based. That's just paper repair for their collection items like maps and things. So, but yeah, that's just private conservation. So I work for about 3 different small museums. But yeah, I mean, all the philatelic work comes from private collectors.
Okay.
And that's really word of mouth. I haven't really had to advertise it, so it's all quite nice. I mean, like the usual ways of advertising with websites and things doesn't really apply in the philatelic arena. So word of mouth is, is the best. Yeah.
Is it mostly people in the UK, or is it a lot of American people as well?
No, a lot of Egyptians.
Oh, okay.
A lot of Saudi Arabians. A lot of it's from Twitter and Instagram, actually. Like a lot of, I just put it up, just, I mean, not to be honest, I should put up more. I'm not very active with it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, I've seen you on Twitter and get in touch with me. That was the main shock, actually, because I don't really use Twitter, so so that was good. But yeah, no, it's English, Egyptian, Saudi Arabians mainly. There's a few Americans, yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't really know why, actually. I don't know, but that's the common occurrence, yeah.
Would you say that there's one particular area's stamp or philatelic items that are most difficult to work on?
Yeah, there's a lot of it's the tropical stamps, the ones from like the Malaysia, Caribbean side, all the ones that have been, as they say in philately, tropicalized, which is basically aged really badly. They're really poorly made. They're really, really fine paper. They're really stored badly. The heat and the humidity in that climate. Sometimes you get sent items like that, and you're meant to magically restore them back to a stable stamp, and you're just like, well, this is sawdust. They're the ones. I can't say specific issues because, as I said, I'm not a philatelic specialist, but the ones that are the most damaged are the ones that come from tropical climates, and they're the ones that I dread working on the most because obviously they're so fragile, and they can't withstand much treatment, so the way of conserving them is very limited. Yeah.
What would you say was the most exciting or most expensive item that you've worked on?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't ask the expense. I don't ask the value.
All right, then exciting. The one that
I know for a fact that a lot, like some of them. I worked on one that was worth 24 grand last year. That was quite, that was simple because one, it wasn't gummed, and two, it was just torn apart. There was a corner torn off it, so I just had to repair the corner back on it. Mm-hmm. So I was quite happy that it was obviously quite a simple repair process. But the client did tell me that it was worth 24 grand, and so that was like, but I'm fully insured and all this, so that's pretty. But at the moment, nothing bad has ever happened, so that's good. But yeah, I don't tend to ask the value of them. I know,
right.
Obviously, I could tell sometimes when I've had some Afghan covers before that I've shown my dad just because I think the Afghan stamps are really beautiful, and he said they're worth a lot of money. But, so when he says that, it means not a lot, but in my perspective. So I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. At the British Library, you're used to working on irreplaceable, unique items all the time. Right. So the way you repair them has zero to do with their monetary value. You have to treat every single item the same. So every item is treated with the same amount of care. So yeah, their monetary value doesn't necessarily mean anything.
And do you work with the team, or are you just individual?
Me. Yeah, it's just me here. Yeah, obviously I work with a big team in museums, but
right.
No, it's just me. It's lovely, really, because I have a studio here, and our philatelic items are often small, so I have the capacity to repair them. Whereas obviously at the British Library, we work on huge maps and huge processes and things, and I could repair them here, but it's quite nice working on philatelic items because it keeps it neat and small. And I don't have to store like big aqueous baths of to repair mats. I can now have just like little trays, and yeah, it's all. I much prefer working small, to be honest. I really like the minutiae and working under magnification. It's I get quite, it's quite adrenaline rush because it's so tiny. It's quite addictive to me.
How much have conservation and restoration methods changed? Because we've had things in our auctions that were restored 100 years ago. You know, I assume the science and technology has advanced a lot. And do you find that maybe things that were restored 100 years ago, they were doing more long-term damage than good? Maybe it looked nice at the time, but the methods they were using, I'm sure, must have been
restored with a heavy hinge.
Yeah, yeah. No, a lot of the work that we carry out at the British Library is undoing the 70s heavy-handed conservation, and we, you know, what they did was do a lot of rebinding, a lot of you know, luckily they're not that much laminated, but you know, bad storage and PVC and bad storage materials, and you know, like heavy tapes, which, you know, if you've got fragile paper and use a heavy tape on it, then it's obviously going to contract and expand, and it's going to crease and it's going to tear. And so a lot of the sellotapes, a lot of the work that we do is undoing that. So yeah, I mean, it's huge. Like, what happened really was in 1978, I think it was, there was the Florence floods, and there was basically a massive national outcry of conservation needed, and that it was then that the real laws of conservation were written, because obviously they had to be restored back to a standard. And, you know, in places like Spain where they're still hacking up sculptures, you know, I mean, those guidelines aren't necessarily kept to all the time, but there is these guidelines, and, you know, like places like Italy and America and England, they're very, very strict. And it was from then you know, that research went into it, and conservation methods started developing. And I mean, it must be the last 20 years that it's really gone very minimal. There's two key words. It's kind of minimal intervention. So basically, there's the whole main ethos of doing as little as possible to stabilize the item as much as possible. So you just don't add on loads of extra material. You don't change the format. I mean, at the British Library, there was loads of beautiful old Chinese bindings that were then bound into Western bindings, you know, and so it's totally jarring. So a lot of it is taking apart the old Western bindings and restoring it back to its original, what it was meant to be, but putting it back into original Chinese binding style to make it to restore the historical integrity of it. So it's all about keeping the integrity of the object whilst doing as little as possible. But obviously you have to know everything about the molecular level and chemistry and material qualities of the paper to be able to do as little as possible whilst achieving as much as possible. It's quite complicated. All objects are complicated.
Yeah. But you mentioned the tape. I've seen a lot of collections that have had the old Scotch tape, and they taped that to the mounts, and but it seeped through onto the stamp. Is that still something that's repairable, or no?
Well, it depends on the stamp.
If it's soaked into the fibers?
It depends on the type of tape. It depends how much, really, because there's some. If the stamp, if it's been repaired from both sides with tape, right? The adhesive is seeped through, and sometimes the paper will go translucent in the middle. And, you know, in that respect, no, it can never be saved, because basically the structure of the stamp is now glue. But there's a lot of times where you can remove the carrier of the tape and then gently remove the adhesive off it using the right solvents. And we have to do that. That's a really common thing that I have to do here. And generally the carrier of the tape is removed with a heated spatula, and then you can remove the glue. But the problem is that not all sellotapes are made with the same glues, and all the solvents are different. And the problem is that if you're applying solvents, then some inks are susceptible to some solvents. So whether it's possible or whether it's not, you know, it depends on the stamp. But yes, it is on more robust paper, it is more possible. So on envelopes and things like that, it's really, really possible. But obviously it depends. Yeah.
So say you get something that, and I know I keep throwing out these hypothetical questions, but have you ever had to remove the gum of a stamp to help preserve the integrity of a stamp?
Yeah, this is a big question. This was in, I got asked this. I've never done it. I've never done it because the gum is as integral to the stamp as the paper is. But that was a big question that they had to ask when setting up the National Postal Museum, because obviously the gum is the thing that is the most volatile and the most susceptible to heat and temperature, and obviously can tear the stamp. But if you think of the stamp as a stratified structure of glue, paper, ink, all three are as vital component parts as the other. So the gum has to be preserved. So it comes down to effective storage rather than gum removal.
Well, when you were talking about the Scotch tape on the stamps, the funny thing that came to mind is that the Arthur Hind collection, he was one of the big collectors in the first half of the 20th century. His collection was sold in the 30s. He was awful, took a cover and applied a piece of tape to either side of the cover. And it's funny because seeing that residue today identifies it as having come from his collection. And it actually speaks, it bodes very well for the cover's provenance that he owned it. So even though he was effectively ruining the covers in a weird way, it's a nice mark of authenticity and good provenance. So that, when you talk about people taping covers, I suppose that was very common for the first couple of decades of this hobby.
Yeah,
it still is common. I mean, people still do it, you know. I mean, it can't, you know, people seem to think that conservation is going to cost them a fortune, which it doesn't. You know, it only costs a fortune if you're wanting loads of, you know, stain reduction and things like that. And a fortune is not a fortune in their book anyway. Anyway. But yeah, so people just think conservation is going to cost a fortune, and I'll just whack some tape on it, and then it just becomes unsellable and highly damaged, and there's no logic to it. But yeah, I mean, this is the thing, you know, with conservation. So items like there's say, you know, you've got a rusty Victorian baking tray and it's still got food residue on it. The food residue is acidic, so it's damaging the tray, but then the food residue is kept on it, because obviously it adds to the historical integrity and provenance of the item. So it would be up to the client to tell me whether they would like it removed, you know? So if you said that tape is really important to the provenance of this item, I would obviously not remove it, and you'd, you know, yeah, it's that would be up to you, yeah, because you would be the, you know, the curator deciding this, yeah.
And when you talk about people assume this is expensive, people assume this is going to cost an arm and a leg, it seems like, you know, it's really much smarter to lay out a little bit of money up front. It's almost like preventative healthcare, I would say, where you make the right decisions now. Maybe the sleeves that you put the covers in are a bit more expensive, or the sheet protectors for your exhibit, but that prevents you from having to lay out a lot of money to undo the damage. It seems like, you know, your work is as much educating people about preventative measures as it is fixing the mistakes that have already been made.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start this. You know, David Beach at the British Library started it all. You know, I mean, he was the one that started lecturing people on preservation, and you know, it's totally valid, because if you know, the initial outlay of good storage materials is going to save you a hell of a lot of money in the future, especially if you especially if you've got an incredibly expensive collection. If you've got gold medal collection, then these items need to be stored properly, and you know, and conservation costs more than storage. It does, but I mean, it's just sure, the least you're going to save money if you store your items correctly. But I mean, conservation, it's the same amount as, you know, as getting a carpenter to repair a door. I mean, it's the same cost, really. I mean, it's, you know, it's a trade at the end of the day. I think people just get terrified and think, oh no, I'll just leave it, and then it just gets worse.
Yes.
You mentioned your Twitter and Instagram. Where can people find examples of your work? If somebody wants to go and see what it is you do visually, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I've got a website. It's called thestamprestorer.com, and that's got some of my work on it. And then obviously on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. But I mean, most of my work comes through my website, really, and then sometimes I get phone calls, and I send through items, like before and after photos of items that are similar to the items that they send me. You know, they send me scans, and then, you know, I look at it and I say, oh, you know, this is similar. And if they hadn't seen my website, And it's a discussion process really at the beginning. It's a total discussion of what I'm able to do for them and what they would like done for the stamp, and it's a negotiation process before any work carried out. So I mean people do. I just direct people to my website really. Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been super informative. Thank you so much for joining us. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, and it's good to let people know that they're in safe hands with the code of ethics and everything.
And I was going to say, hopefully remove some of that taboo. You mentioned your father was initially skeptical, and he came around on it. So I think that maybe
there's a lot. This has gone on for years. I'm a member of the Royal Philatelic Society, so generally I have. There's quite a lot of people in the Royal Philatelic Society now in London that have heard me and, do take the advice. So, I mean, it's definitely not falling on deaf ears, certainly. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a great place for people who want to preserve things in their collections that they wish had just looked a little better.
Yeah, there's a lot of staining. Stuff's badly stored, and then it's got rats wee on them, and you've got loads of brown staining.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff can be removed really easily, and then you've got beautiful items again. There was a cover that I did for Chris King, and it had loads and loads of foxing spots the whole way across it and was worth zero. And then I did a chelation wash bath with them and removed the spots. And the cover is now worth quite a lot, and he was very happy about it. So I mean, it's quite. I think it's quite easy to sway people. Once they see the effect you can have, because he was a skeptic, but now he's not, so that's good.
Yeah, because it is a visual hobby. When you're looking at something that doesn't look nice, and
it's
artwork,
you can,
exactly.
Yeah, it's artwork, and it's like making stuff look nicer whilst preserving it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's logic. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, it's what we do on all books and all artwork all over the world. So it's just a mindset thing, and frankly, it is changing. So it's fine by me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us and taking the time out. I'm sure you're incredibly busy with all the stuff that not many people can take their work home, but it sounds like that's the only place.
Yeah, I know. All the furlough has been really great. I've had time to do it. It's great. No, thanks. It's really nice to talk to you.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for joining us, and best of luck. And we'll put all of your links in the description for this episode. And this has been really great.
Oh, thank you. Well, keep me in mind.
Yeah.
If you ever have any more questions, contact me. It's no bother.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
No problem at all. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Michael, did you learn as much as you thought you were going to? Because I certainly did.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned so much about the ethics. I didn't know that they had to uniformly abide by this code.
It's like the Hippocratic Oath that doctors take. It's like there's this whole set of what she can do, what she can't do. I love that because that gives me a lot more confidence, in the work, and in that there are good people doing this job for very legitimate reasons, not to deceive, not to artificially increase the value of something, but simply to make sure that these things even exist for future generations.
Right, and the fact that she doesn't even ask people what the value of an item is, she's not looking to...
It doesn't matter if it's a $10 item or a $10,000 item. It's about doing right by the object in front of her. She's not going to treat a expensive item differently than maybe it's just somebody's favorite cover and it's not worth anything, but they want it taken care of. I like that doesn't factor into her work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and learning a lot about the way that museums preserve items, they trade them and then they have to conserve them afterwards, and it's something that I didn't know of before, and it's interesting to know. And
you don't think go to Washington D.C. and look at the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, and you rarely think about what goes into not making it look better, but just making it look the same, just keeping it.
Because it sounds like
crazy.
That sounds like it's almost 50% of her job is just, she said, protecting it from mites, telling people how to store their items, giving them advice on.
undoing what other people did. I found that very
Yes.
amusing.
Yeah,
So
no.
much, again, things are going to happen naturally, but so much of her work is caused by, I don't want to say carelessness, because a lot of it was probably well-intentioned
Right.
decades ago, but it's amazing how much work conservationists created for themselves, not Daisy specifically, but past
Right.
generations.
Right. Yeah, and the fact that they document everything. Before she touches it, she documents what it looked like. After she fixes it, she documents it, and then she gives them almost a certificate of authenticity for the
Yeah, a whole report on what it is she's done. I think it's
Right.
amazing that there's so much oversight and so much care put into it. So
Yeah.
I thought this was fantastic, and I'm really glad we were able to speak to her.
Yeah, I hope it informs a lot of people, and I hope a lot of people who have items that need to be conserved consider sending them in, or consider.
Yeah, and it, again, if it needs to be conserved, absolutely. Maybe it'll encourage some people to just take better care of what they have too.
Yeah.
Don't let it get to that point. Just let's save these things while we can.
Yeah, it's funny that half of her job is preventing her from doing work in the future.
She should tell people to put things in these super acidic, volatile sleeves so that she, ensures a long career in the hobby.
Well,
Now, I'm sure there's more than enough stuff for her to work on for many lifetimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, to anybody listening, we are on all the podcast platforms. Do I have to go through these every? It's
I think
become
we're
a
fine.
thing.
Yeah.
Apple Podcast, Spotify Podcast, Google, Podbean. I'm getting quicker. Website, philatelypodcast.com.
Philatelypodcast at gmail.com.
Exactly. Please reach out to us. Tell us if you enjoyed stories like Daisy's. I think that these non-philatelists who are connected to the philatelic world are very interesting. She's not a collector. She doesn't pretend to be a collector, but she's still an integral part of the hobby that we all know and love. Or for us, it's less of a hobby and more of a sentence. But again, I think that conversations with philatelists is almost misleading in a way. These aren't just when you thought of that name. No, but she's not a philatelist, but she's integral to philately, and I think that's just as important to remember. So, let us know if you want to hear from more people like her. Let us know. Don't let us know if you didn't like the episode.
No, well, I mean, a couple of people have reached out and said, well, you should interview that person again. So people do it. Let us know if you...
Yeah, please let us know what you think.
Yeah.
And our next guest, we'll keep it a surprise.
No, we can say it.
Can we mention?
Yeah.
Gordon Eubanks?
We can mention Gordon Eubanks.
He's the opposite end of the spectrum. He is as much a philatelist as anyone. He is...
He's won two champions.
I was going to say we'll go into his resume before we talk to him, because I don't even know where to begin talking about Gordon Eubanks. The model collector, the epitome of a philatelist in the year 2020. So I love that we can go from talking to somebody who's not a philatelist but is integral to the hobby to somebody who is the very definition.
Quintessential philatelist.
So I think that'll be a lot of fun.
You've said in episodes before, you feel like you're getting whiplash with all these interviews, the different directions that they're all.
I'm just glad Daisy didn't take any shots at the UN Postal Administration.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun, Michael. I'm looking forward to talking to Gordon, and I think this was a really fantastic conversation.
All right. Until next time, Charles.
Until next time, we'll talk real soon, Michael.
Yeah. See you then.